The morning began the same way it always had for Harold Jones. At 68 years old, he had a routine he trusted. The coffee pot gurgled in the kitchen, the newspaper lay folded by his plate, and a single slice of toast sat half-eaten beside him. Outside, autumn leaves shifted across the lawn in restless patterns, but inside, everything felt quiet, dependable, and his. That illusion shattered the moment his daughter walked in. "Daddy!" Lauren called, her voice bright, almost rehearsed. At 37, she still used that word when she wanted something, and Harold knew it. She stepped into the kitchen carrying a thick manila envelope pressed against her chest like a prize. Her smile was stretched too wide, the kind of smile people wear when they are hiding something. Behind her came Bradley, her husband, 39, broad-shouldered, with the swagger of a man who believed he belonged in places that were never his. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed, his expression a blend of boredom and smugness. Harold had never liked the way Bradley treated his home as if it were his own. Lauren placed the envelope on the table, sliding it across the crumbs from Harold's toast. "I have a surprise for you," she said. Harold folded his newspaper slowly, carefully, because something in his daughter's eyes made his stomach tighten. He lifted the envelope. It was heavy, filled with papers that shifted and rustled. The return address bore the name of a law firm he had never heard of. "Go ahead," Bradley urged, his tone cutting through the room like a knife. "Open it. We've been waiting." Harold tore the seam. Papers spilled across the table. At first, he saw neat columns of numbers, unfamiliar signatures, and official letterheads. Then his eyes caught the figure that froze his breath. $600,000 debt. Loan documents, credit card statements, casino receipts, every page stamped with his name. "What is this?" Harold's voice came out sharper than he intended. "Your debts, Daddy," Lauren answered, her smile dissolving. "We found them when we were helping you organize last month. They all need to be paid by Monday. Otherwise, the house, the cars, everything will be gone." Harold blinked at the pages. "I have never stepped inside a casino in my life." His voice shook. "This isn't mine." Bradley pushed off the counter, stepping closer. "The signatures look authentic to me, and unless you've forgotten, memory gets tricky at your age." His smirk widened. The handwriting did look like his, too perfect, every loop and stroke copied down to the smallest detail. Harold's chest tightened. He shoved the papers away. "Someone forged these. You two did this." Lauren's smile twisted, and for a moment the daughter he had raised, the little girl who used to curl beside him with storybooks, was gone. In her place stood a stranger, eyes sharp with calculation. "We're trying to help you," she said, but her voice cracked. "If you don't pay, we all lose everything. We have nowhere else to go." "Family doesn't steal," Harold whispered. Bradley's jaw hardened. "Enough of this." Harold stood, pushing his chair back. The papers scattered across the table, covering the place where he had eaten breakfast every morning for 30 years. His hands trembled, not from age but from rage. "This is my house. My name is on the deed. You will not take it from me." That was when Lauren moved. Her hand shot out, grabbing the coffee pot from the counter. Steam curled from the spout, the liquid inside still boiling hot. "You've always been stubborn," she snapped, her face contorted with fury. "You've always cared more about pride than family. Maybe this will wake you up." "Lauren, don't," Harold began, but it was too late. The pot tipped, and scalding coffee cascaded across his chest. It soaked through his flannel shirt, searing his skin with white-hot agony. He gasped, stumbling backward, the pain immediate, blinding. The cup in his hand clattered to the floor and shattered. For a heartbeat, silence. Then Bradley's voice, calm and cold. "Get out, old man. This is our house now." Harold pressed his palm against his chest, feeling the burn throb beneath soaked fabric. He looked at his daughter, still clutching the empty pot, her eyes wide with shock but not regret. He looked at Bradley, blocking the doorway, his stance daring Harold to resist. 30 years of mortgage payments. 30 years of sweat, discipline, and sacrifice. And now, his own blood had turned on him. Through the ringing in his ears, Harold barely registered the knock at the front door. "Firm," repeated. Then a louder voice. "Police department, open up." Lauren's head whipped toward Bradley, panic flashing across her face. Bradley's expression darkened. Harold straightened despite the pain, despite the burns that screamed with every breath. He realized in that moment the fight had only begun. They thought they had stripped him of everything, but they had no idea what they had just started. And as the pounding on the door grew louder, Harold whispered to himself, steady and clear, "Not by a long shot." Harold staggered through the back door, his chest still throbbing where the coffee had burned him. The October air bit cold against his damp shirt, and each breath came sharp, as if his lungs had been scorched along with his skin. He clutched his suitcase, not packed with care, but hastily stuffed with whatever he could grab before Bradley blocked the hall. He did not head toward the street. Instead, his feet carried him across the yard to the one place that had always felt safe. Martha Thomas lived just beyond the fence line. 65, retired from decades teaching elementary school, Martha had been his neighbor for more than 20 years. She had a sharp tongue but a generous heart, and she never turned away a friend in need. Harold hoped that would still be true tonight. He rapped on her back door, trying to make the knock sound casual. It came out desperate instead. The door opened within seconds. Martha stood there in a blue robe, her gray hair tied back, eyes narrowing as she took in Harold's face. "Lord above, Harold, what happened to you?" He tried to straighten, to hide the pain, but the soaked fabric clung to his chest. The burns had spread into angry red patches across his neck. "Coffee," he rasped. "Lauren," she threw it. Martha's gasp was sharp enough to cut glass. She pulled him inside without another word, guiding him toward the small kitchen table where she'd graded thousands of spelling tests over the years. The room smelled of bacon and chamomile tea. Comforting. Safe. "Sit," she ordered. "You're shaking." Harold lowered himself onto the chair, wincing as the skin beneath his shirt pulled. Martha fetched a clean towel and pressed it gently against his chest. The cool fabric stung at first, then dulled the fire. "She burned you," Martha muttered, more to herself than to him. "Your own daughter." "She's not the same," Harold whispered. "I don't know who she is anymore." Martha pulled another chair close and sat down across from him, her eyes, still sharp after all these years, locked on his. "This isn't just a family argument, Harold. This is assault. And that husband of hers, what was his name again?" "Bradley." "Bradley. He's behind this, isn't he?" Harold nodded weakly. "Papers, loans. $600,000, all in my name, forged signatures." Martha leaned back, her lips pressed thin. "That's fraud. Identity theft. Elder abuse. This isn't something you ignore." "They're my family," Harold said, his voice breaking on the word. "Lauren is my little girl. I raised her after her mother died. I put her through college. I helped her with her wedding. I thought I was giving her a life better than mine. And look what she gave back." Martha's voice softened, but the steel remained. "You can't let them take your house. You can't let them keep doing this." Harold's hands trembled on the tabletop. "If I go to the police..." "You have to go to the police." Martha reached over and clasped his hand. Her grip was firm, anchoring him. "This isn't about shame. This is about survival. If you don't act, they'll ruin you. They'll drain every account, take every paper, and leave you with nothing." The words landed heavy. Harold wanted to argue, to say that family came first, that mistakes could be forgiven. But the burn on his chest told another story. The betrayal was too clear. Martha stood and crossed to the counter. She lifted the old landline phone from its cradle and set it in front of him. The coiled cord twisted between them like a lifeline. "Dial," she said. "Tell them what happened." Harold stared at the handset. His reflection stared back in the glossy surface, an aging man, wounded and weary. He thought of Lauren's face, twisted in anger as she hurled boiling coffee. He thought of Bradley's smirk, daring him to resist. "They'll say it's just a domestic dispute," Harold whispered. "No," Martha said firmly. "They'll say it's a crime. Because it island." Silence stretched between them. The ticking of Martha's wall clock filled the room. Harold reached for the phone. His hand hovered, then withdrew. His breath shook. "She's still my daughter." Martha leaned in, eyes blazing. "And if you don't stop her now, Harold, she'll be the one to destroy you. Blood or not, you deserve better than this." The weight of truth pressed down on him. He lifted the phone, his fingers curling around the receiver. For the first time all day, his hand steadied. "This isn't over," he murmured, echoing the words he'd spoken in his kitchen, "not by a long shot." And with that, Harold dialed. The phone felt heavier than it should have, as though the plastic receiver carried the weight of 37 years of fatherhood. Harold pressed it to his ear, his burned skin prickling against the motion. The steady hum of the dial tone filled the silence between him and Martha, who stood close by, arms folded, her presence as solid as the oak table beneath his elbows. He punched the numbers with deliberate care. 911. The line clicked. Emergency services. "What's your emergency?" Harold's throat tightened. The words he had to say tasted like betrayal. "My daughter attacked me this morning," he managed. "She threw boiling coffee on me. I have burns on my chest and neck. Her husband threatened me. They forged documents, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debts in my name. They told me to leave my own house." The dispatcher's tone never wavered. "Sir, are you in a safe location now?" "Yes," Harold said, glancing at Martha. "I'm at my neighbor's home. Can you provide the address?" He recited it carefully. His voice shook only once. "Officers are on the way," the dispatcher assured. "Please remain where you are. Do you require medical attention for the burns?" Harold touched the raw skin at his collar. "I don't think so. It hurts, but I can breathe. I'll have them look when they arrive." The dispatcher asked for names, descriptions, and details. Harold spelled them out. Lauren Rodriguez, 37. His daughter, Bradley Martin, 39. Her husband. Both still inside his house. He listed their height, hair color, the tone of their voices when they demanded he pay $600,000 in forged debts. When he finally set the phone back into its cradle, the kitchen seemed unnaturally still. The clock ticked. The kettle hissed faintly on the stove. "You did the right thing," Martha said firmly. Harold exhaled. "It feels like I just signed away my family." Martha leaned forward, her gaze unwavering. "Family doesn't burn you with scalding coffee. Family doesn't forge signatures." "They crossed the line, Harold. Now it's time for you to protect yourself." Headlights cut across the window, flooding the small kitchen with pale beams. The crunch of tires on gravel followed. Martha rose, pulling aside the curtain. "They're here." Harold pushed himself up, every muscle stiff from shock and pain. Outside, 2 uniformed officers stepped from their patrol car. The woman, tall and steady, adjusted her duty belt with practiced ease. The man beside her scanned the yard with sharp alertness. Moments later, a knock sounded at Martha's door. She opened it. "Officers, thank you for coming." "Mr. Jones?" the female officer asked, her eyes already fixed on the red burn marks visible above Harold's collar. "I'm Officer Kayla Martin. This is Officer Jordan Williams. We're here in response to your call." Harold nodded, his voice rough. "Yes, thank you. May we come in?" Martha stepped aside, and the officers entered. The warm light of her kitchen cast long shadows over their uniforms. Officer Williams carried a small notebook. Officer Martin carried a camera. "Can you describe exactly what happened this morning?" Martin asked, her tone calm but commanding. Harold told them everything: the breakfast table, the manila envelope, the documents with his forged signature, Lauren's shifting smile, Bradley's threats, and finally the coffee pot exploding against his chest. As he spoke, Officer Martin photographed the burns, angling the camera with professional detachment. Officer Williams scribbled notes. "And you said the total amount of debt was approximately $600,000? "Yes," Harold confirmed. "All fraudulent. I have never gambled. Not once." Martin exchanged a look with her partner. "That's felony-level fraud. Combined with the assault, we have probable cause." "They're still in my house," Harold added quietly. "They told me to get out. They said it was theirs now." Martha snorted from across the table. "The deed is in Harold's name. They're squatters with violent tendencies." Officer Martin straightened. "We'll need you to accompany us, Mr. Jones. You can point out the documents. We'll secure the scene, separate the parties, and collect evidence." Harold's chest tightened. The thought of stepping back into his home, with Lauren and Bradley still inside, made his skin crawl worse than the burns. But he nodded. All right. Martha touched his arm. You won't be alone. Within minutes, Harold stood in the crisp night air again, flanked by 2 officers. Ahead loomed his house, the windows glowing faintly. Shadows moved behind the curtains. The place he had built, maintained, and loved now felt like enemy territory. Officer Williams approached the front door, his knuckles rapping firmly. Police department. Open up. Inside hurried voices, the scrape of a chair, then silence. Harold's pulse hammered in his ears. The fight had come home again, and this time it would not end with coffee stains. It would end with handcuffs. The front door opened with a slow creak. Lauren stood there, her face pale in the porch light. Behind her, Bradley loomed in the hallway, his jaw tight, his eyes flashing irritation at the officer's presence. Good evening, Officer Kayla Martin said evenly. We need to speak with you both about an incident reported earlier tonight. Lauren forced a tremulous smile. There must be some mistake. We were just having a family discussion. A discussion doesn't end with burns on your father's chest, Harold said sharply, stepping forward. His voice cracked, but his resolve held. Lauren's gaze darted to the visible red patches above his collar. Daddy, it was an accident. Enough, Bradley snapped. He tried to wedge himself between Lauren and the officers. You can't just walk in here without a warrant. Officer Jordan Williams moved deliberately, his stance firm. Sir, step aside. We have probable cause of domestic assault and fraud. We are entering. Bradley's jaw tightened, but he shifted reluctantly as the officers stepped past him into the kitchen. The air still carried the bitter smell of scorched coffee. On the table lay the scattered documents, creased and coffee-stained. Officer Martin gestured to them. Mr. Jones, are these the papers you described? Yes, Harold said. His chest tightened as he pointed to the neat rows of numbers, the forged signatures identical to his own. Every one of them is false. $600,000 in debts I never made. Williams photographed each page, careful to capture the letterheads and signature lines. This is extensive. Lauren's voice cracked. We were only trying to help him face reality. Help? Harold's anger surged. By forging my name, by scalding me in my own kitchen? Officer Martin turned to Lauren. Did you throw hot coffee on your father this evening? Lauren's lips parted, but no words came. Her silence was answer enough. Martin's voice sharpened. Lauren Rodriguez, you are under arrest for domestic battery. She pulled handcuffs from her belt and stepped forward. Lauren recoiled, tears streaming. No, please. He's my father. I didn't mean... The metallic click of the cuffs cut through her plea. Bradley lunged forward, his voice rising. You can't arrest her. This is our house, our family business. Harold's stomach twisted. Even now, Bradley tried to claim ownership of what was not his. Officer Williams faced him squarely. Bradley Martin, you are under arrest for attempted extortion, fraud, and identity theft. Place your hands behind your back. Bradley sneered but obeyed, his wrists forced into steel. This is harassment, he spat. That old man brought it on himself. Harold stepped closer, his burns stinging as he met Bradley's eyes. I gave you shelter. I gave you food. And you repaid me with lies and theft. For once, Bradley had no quick retort. The officers led him toward the door, his curses filling the hallway. Lauren sobbed, her voice trailing as Martin guided her out. Daddy, please don't let them do this. We're family. Harold's heart wrenched, but he stood firm. Family doesn't destroy family, he said quietly. The night swallowed their voices as the officers escorted them outside. The patrol car's lights painted the yard in red and blue flashes, reflections flickering across the windows of Harold's house. Martha appeared at the fence line, her robe pulled tight against the cold. She caught Harold's eye, gave a single nod. Strength, solidarity. Inside, Officer Williams returned to finish gathering evidence. He sealed the documents in a folder, marked them carefully, then handed Harold a card with the case number. The prosecutor will contact you. For tonight, we suggest you stay with your neighbor until the house can be secured. Harold nodded. The house he had lived in for over 3 decades suddenly felt foreign, poisoned by betrayal. Still, as the patrol cars pulled away with Lauren and Bradley inside, relief stirred faintly in his chest. It was not victory, not yet, but it was a beginning. He turned to Martha, who waited in the glow of her porch light. For the first time in hours, Harold managed a weary smile. "They thought they could take everything," he murmured, "but they underestimated me." And with the flashing lights fading into the night, Harold stepped back across the fence, leaving the wreckage of his kitchen behind for now. The patrol cars disappeared down the street, leaving behind silence broken only by the low hum of crickets. Harold stood in Martha's yard, the cool air brushing his skin where the burn still throbbed beneath his shirt. The flashing lights were gone, but their ghostly reflections seemed to linger in his windows, reminders of everything that had just collapsed inside. "Come on," Martha said gently. "You're not staying there tonight. You'll take the guest room." Harold wanted to argue he had never liked being a burden, but exhaustion pressed down on him. He nodded. Inside Martha's warm kitchen, she fussed over him like a nurse, preparing a bowl of cool water and gauze. "We'll have the doctor look tomorrow. Tonight, rest." Harold sat, wincing as she dabbed the angry red marks across his chest. The pain was sharp, but sharper still was the ache inside him. His daughter, his only child, was in the back of a police car. His son-in-law, the man he had tried to accept, was shackled for fraud. The house he had built was now a crime scene. "Do you regret calling?" Martha asked quietly. Harold swallowed hard. "I regret that it came to this, but no, if I hadn't, they would have destroyed me." For the first time that night, sleep eventually claimed him, restless though it was. Morning brought no peace. A call from the prosecutor's office confirmed what the officers had said. Lauren faced charges of domestic battery. Bradley would be held on fraud and identity theft. There would be a preliminary hearing within the week. By the end of that week, Harold found himself sitting stiffly on a wooden bench in a courtroom that smelled of old varnish and cold stone. Judge Arthur Rodriguez presided, his gavel tapping for order. Lauren stood pale and tearful at the defense table, her wrists free but her eyes rimmed red. Bradley looked defiant, his chin jutted forward as if he were the one wronged. The judge's words fell like hammers. Bradley would remain in custody, facing multiple felony counts. Lauren was granted probation and released under strict orders, including a no-contact injunction with her father. Harold's stomach twisted at that phrase, yet a bitter part of him welcomed the barrier. When the gavel came down, Harold exhaled shakily. Justice had begun, but the fight was far from over. Back at Martha's house, Harold tried to breathe through the changes. He sipped tea, stared out her kitchen window at his own darkened home, and wrestled with the hollow ache in his chest. That was when another blow arrived. An envelope waited in Martha's mailbox, forwarded from Harold's address. The return stamp bore 3 letters that made his blood run cold. IRS. His hands trembled as he tore it open. Inside was a notice of deficiency. According to their records, Harold owed $60,000 in unpaid taxes, penalties, and interest. The cause: unreported gambling winnings tied to accounts opened in his name. He stared at the page until the numbers blurred. $60,000, his entire savings, and then some. Bradley's handiwork had reached deeper than he imagined. Martha read the letter over his shoulder, her face hardening. "He's been using your identity for years," she said flatly. "This proves it." Harold's chest ached worse than his burns. "I kept every receipt, every return. I've never gambled, never once. And yet here at Island, they'll believe the papers, not me." "No," Martha corrected. "They'll believe the evidence, which we're going to gather." Her certainty steadied him. The next days blurred with meetings. Harold sat across from a lawyer recommended by Martha, a woman who specialized in elder exploitation cases. She listened intently as Harold laid out the forged loans, the assault, the tax notice. When he finished, she tapped her pen against a yellow pad. "You have a strong case," she said, "but you need proof, hard proof that Bradley created those accounts. Screenshots, correspondence, anything digital." Harold thought of the laptop Bradley often borrowed, the browser windows left open, the files hastily closed. Perhaps somewhere in that chaos lay the trail they needed. For the first time in weeks, determination flared inside him. "They wanted to take everything from me," Harold said, his voice low but steady. "But I'm not done fighting." Martha smiled faintly across the desk. "Good. Because this is only the beginning." News traveled faster than Harold expected. Within days of the preliminary hearing, Bradley's name began appearing in public records. Martha, with her teacher's patience and researcher's instinct, pulled copies of filings from the county clerk. Each page painted a picture of a man whose world was caving in. The first was a bankruptcy petition. Bradley Martin, age 39, seeking Chapter 7 relief for debts totaling more than $600,000. Gambling markers, unpaid loans, credit cards maxed out and ignored, his entire financial life laid bare in black ink. Harold stared at the numbers, stunned. For years, Bradley had strutted through his kitchen, bragging about schemes and opportunities. Yet here was the truth, a hollow empire built on sand. "He tried to shift it all onto you," Martha muttered, flipping to the schedule of creditors. When that failed, everything collapsed. The next document chilled Harold further. An arrest record from the year before, for writing fraudulent checks. Bradley had been released on bail, trial scheduled for the coming months. Harold had never known. His stomach twisted as he realized Lauren must have known all along. She had stood beside her husband, covering his tracks, while Bradley prepared to hang the debts on her father. Worse still were the notes Martha uncovered from online betting accounts. Screenshots captured by Harold's lawyer's investigator showed transaction after transaction: football games, poker tournaments, horse races. Bets climbing from $500 to $4,000 at a time. The accounts were registered in Harold's name, his social security number attached like a chain. "Evidence," the lawyer said firmly. "This is what clears you." But Harold felt no triumph as he scrolled through the screenshots. He saw only betrayal, line after line, a paper trail of theft wrapped in his identity. Bradley's collapse accelerated. The construction company where he had last found work filed a termination notice. Company policy, it read, forbade employing anyone charged with violent crimes. The dismissal was immediate. Soon after, letters arrived from collection agencies. One, stamped in bold red, announced repossession of a car. Another warned of foreclosure proceedings on a storage unit. The empire of lies Bradley had built was not only falling, it was crumbling publicly, leaving nothing but shame in its wake. From his jail cell, Bradley still fought. At the hearing, he shouted that Harold had framed him, that the old man was senile, incapable of managing his affairs. But Judge Rodriguez silenced him with a single sharp rap of the gavel. "Mr. Martin, your words do not erase evidence," the judge said. "Your record speaks louder than your excuses." The worst revelation arrived one evening when Martha's phone buzzed with a call from Harold's lawyer. She held it out, her expression grave. "You need to hear this." On speakerphone, the lawyer explained that Bradley's debts extended beyond banks and casinos. Text messages pulled from his seized phone showed exchanges with loan sharks, men with names like Big Tony and Ice Mike. The amounts were staggering, $50,000 here, $30,000 there, with interest that doubled every month. "These are dangerous people," the lawyer warned. "They'll come looking for payment. They may not care that Bradley is in custody." Harold felt his chest tighten. The thought of such men connected to his family filled him with dread. But the lawyer continued, voice steady. "Their anger will be directed at Bradley. The evidence is clear that you were the victim, not the partner. Still, be cautious." Harold hung up, staring at the dark window of Martha's kitchen. Beyond it, his house loomed, silent and shuttered. Once it had been his sanctuary. Now it felt like a battlefield, each room tainted by the schemes of a man who had pretended to be family. That night, Harold sat at the table with Martha. She poured him tea, her steady hands a contrast to his trembling ones. "He's losing everything," she said. "Bankruptcy, jail, creditors. Even Lauren's filed for divorce while he's locked up." Harold looked down at his burned skin, healing slowly but still tender. "He thought he could break me," he said softly. "But in the end, he destroyed himself." Martha reached across the table, squeezing his hand. "And you're still standing." For the first time in weeks, Harold allowed himself to believe it. The first bouquet appeared on Harold's porch a week after the hearing. Daisies and baby's breath, tied together with a ribbon that looked hastily borrowed. For a moment, Harold's chest clenched. Lauren used to pick the same flowers from his garden when she was a child. But when he bent down to lift the bouquet, the ache in his chest hardened into something else. He carried the flowers straight to the trash bin. Martha watched from the fence. "You don't owe her nostalgia," she said firmly. But nostalgia was a tricky beast. It crept in at night, whispering memories of bedtime stories and scraped knees, even as the present shouted betrayal. Lauren's life unraveled quickly after her arrest. Harold's lawyer forwarded court reports that documented each misstep. She violated the restraining order within days, showing up at Harold's house twice while he was out. The first time she claimed she had left important papers. The second time neighbors spotted her sitting on the porch, weeping, until the police arrived. Each violation extended her probation and added more fines. Her job vanished too. The retail store where she worked let her go after her mugshot appeared in the local paper. No manager wanted the risk of employing someone with a domestic violence conviction. By the end of the month, she was sleeping at a women's shelter, her belongings crammed into 2 duffel bags. Still, she tried to reach him. Harold's phone log showed 17 calls in one day, 9 voicemails stacked together until his inbox cut her off. Her voice shifted from pleading to angry to broken within those recordings, but Harold never listened past the first. His lawyer arranged for her number to be blocked, but she found ways around it: borrowed phones, public phones, even letters slipped into Martha's mailbox. One letter, written in Lauren's careful script, began with 3 words Harold had once longed to hear: "I am sorry." He read no further before folding it back up. Sorry had come too late. At the next hearing, Judge Rodriguez ordered Lauren to pay restitution $20,000 for damages to be repaid in monthly installments over 5 years. Harold almost laughed at the irony. The daughter who had tried to rob him of his home would now send him checks, small reminders of betrayal dressed as compensation. Lauren stood in court that day with her head bowed, her dark hair hiding her face. Bradley, seated at another table in shackles, sneered at her openly. Their marriage was dissolving before the ink on the divorce papers dried. Harold felt no triumph, only sorrow, heavy and permanent. That evening, Martha found him staring out her kitchen window again, his tea untouched. "She's still your daughter," Martha said gently. Harold shook his head. "She used to be. That woman in court, she isn't the girl I raised. She chose lies over truth, Bradley over decency. Some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned." Martha didn't argue. She simply placed her hand over his, steady and warm, reminding him he was not alone. The next week, another bouquet appeared, this time with a note: "Please, Daddy, just talk to me." Harold tore the paper in half without opening the door. He would not let flowers or words undo the truth of what had happened. He had felt the searing heat of betrayal on his chest, smelled the bitter steam rising from a pot wielded by his own child. No apology could erase that. Yet when night came, lying in the guest room at Martha's, he admitted something silently to himself. A part of him still wanted to believe she could change, that the girl who once curled beside him with storybooks was still there, buried deep. But belief alone could not protect him. Belief could not keep his house safe or restore his dignity. He turned onto his side, staring at the shadows on the wall. The flowers in the trash outside were already wilting. Lauren was learning, the hard way, that consequences were not suggestions. They were debts with interest, compounding until they broke even the strongest will. Harold closed his eyes, letting the silence settle around him. For the first time in weeks, his heart did not race with fear. It beat steady, deliberate, resolute. The locksmith finished his work on a cold morning at the end of November. New deadbolts gleamed on the front and back doors, reinforced frames stood solid, and a security system chimed softly when Harold tested it. For the first time in years, the house truly belonged to him again. He stood in the entryway, breathing in the quiet. The air no longer smelled of stale smoke or cheap cologne. The rooms echoed slightly, stripped of the clutter Lauren and Bradley had left behind. What remained was simple: his furniture, his photographs, his memories. The house felt lighter, as if it too had been waiting for this moment of freedom. Martha arrived with a box of fresh curtains and a bag of groceries. "It looks different already," she said, smiling as she set the bags on the counter. "It feels different," Harold admitted. "Peaceful." They worked together that afternoon, rehanging curtains, rearranging furniture, and airing out rooms. The spare bedroom, once occupied by Bradley's endless excuses, was painted a soft blue. Harold set up his desk by the window, a place for quiet writing and bill paying without fear of interference. 3 weeks later, Robert from the prosecutor's office delivered the final news. Bradley had been sentenced to 9 months in county jail for fraud and extortion. His bankruptcy case was closing with nothing left to liquidate. The creditors had shifted their fury squarely onto him. Lauren received 2 years of probation and mandatory counseling. She was also ordered to repay Harold $20,000 over time. "You'll be seeing checks in the mail," Robert explained, handing over the paperwork. Harold nodded slowly. "Every month, a reminder." Martha touched his shoulder, a reminder that she chose her path and that you survived it. Life began to settle again. Harold returned to his routines. Morning tea, a newspaper at the kitchen table, afternoons tending to his garden. He planted new roses in memory of his wife, their petals opening bright against the winter light. The garage was organized once more, his tools resting in neat rows, untouched by careless hands. He even dusted off his travel journals. For decades, Harold had quietly maintained a side life as a freelance food critic, writing under a pen name. His modest pension from mechanical work had always been real, but it was his restaurant reviews that built the savings Bradley had tried to steal. Now, editors were calling again. One offered him a chance to review a series of new dining spots across the coast. "Ready to get back to work?" the editor asked over the phone. Harold glanced out the window at the roses, the security system light blinking green, the tidy kitchen that was his once more. "More than ready," he said. On the evening before his flight, Martha joined him for dinner. She brought a bottle of wine, and together they toasted at the kitchen table. "To peace," Harold said, raising his glass. "To resilience," Martha countered. They clinked glasses, the sound light and hopeful. Harold leaned back, savoring the moment. "They thought they could break me," he said. "But here I am, stronger." Martha nodded. "You didn't just survive, Harold. You reclaimed your life." As night settled, Harold walked through his house one final time. The security chime beeped softly as he locked each door. The grandfather clock ticked steadily in the living room. In the kitchen, the kettle whistled gently. All ordinary sounds, yet to Harold, they were music, the rhythm of a home restored. He poured himself a cup of tea and carried it to the porch. The November air was cool but not harsh. Across the yard, Martha's light glowed warmly through her window. Harold sipped slowly, the burn on his chest now a fading scar rather than a fresh wound. His daughter's betrayal would always mark him, but so would his decision to fight back, to call for help, to reclaim what was his. The house stood solid behind him, no longer a battleground but a sanctuary once more. And as Harold set down his cup and watched the stars appear overhead, he whispered to himself with quiet conviction, "They underestimated me."